Okay.
Give me a second here. Okay, let's do this.
Okay.
Hopefully there'll be no screw ups this time on here. Okay, and we are rolling, ladies and gentlemen.
Hopefully there'll be
Welcome
no
to
screw ups
episode
this time on
14
here.
of our music memory series.
Okay.
Arknolia and the
And we are
Doctor
rolling,
here.
ladies and gentlemen.
And tonight we're going to be taking a look at a very influential band from the British invasion scene. We know their one biggest hit of all time, which was, we all know, covered by Van Halen, and was also even done recently for a video vlog by Robert Fripp of King Crimson and his wife, Tanya Wilcox, as which, by the way, is on her channel. The title is simply Toya. And we know this band pretty well for other songs like Tired of Waiting for You, All Day and All the Night, Lola, State of Confusion, Come Dancing, and songs like Catch Me Now, I'm Falling, Low Budget, other songs there that they have done other than the one we already know, of course, which is You Really Got Me, which I mentioned, of course, was covered by Van Halen on their first record there. I'm speaking of Ray and Dave Davies and their group, the Kinks. And apparently they are still together, I think. But yet it just hasn't been active since 1993, I think.
Right.
That's when their last album came out. It was called Phobia.
Yeah, it's kind of funny because this group is not metal, but it's what I guess you would call hard rocking compared to what else was out about then.
Yes.
But if anything, it's a precursor for metal, but it's not metal.
Yeah.
It's kind of a look at what could be done with guitars and heaviness.
That's right. Yeah. Now, according to the Wikipedia that I have here, they gave its last performance in 1996 and broke up the following year as a result of a creative tension between both Ray and Dave Davies. Those two have been known many times to pretty much like the Gallagher brothers in Oasis at times. In
Right.
fact, it was said that you could tell when they go on stage that Ray and Davey had a massive fight before getting on stage, because you see Dave's microphone would be on the way left, and Ray's would be on the far right. So a lot of times those brothers at times don't always get along. But then again, sibling rivalry always comes along when you're in when you have two brothers or sisters in any rock band, whether it's the Wilson sisters, the Van Halen brothers, the Abbott brothers in Pantera, or as I mentioned, the Gallagher brothers in Oasis.
Yeah. For some reason, brothers in the same band they don't always get along well. Some do, but there's also examples of a lot that don't. And I
Yeah,
say brothers, I mean siblings, because
yeah,
that went for Ann and Nancy Wilson for the most part. Although
yes.
they pretty much held it together for the duration.
Yeah, and they finally got back together a couple of years back after being apart for a couple of years, because apparently some sort of issue involving Ann's dog and Nancy's husband for some reason. They were apart for about a couple of years, and they announced that they patched things up, and guess they're supposed to go on the road pretty soon. But as we all know, the pandemic struck us
Yeah.
like it did.
The Kinks were one of those groups that I would have dearly loved to have seen in a concert.
Yeah, you know. I remember there were a lot of versions of there was a live album they released in 1980 called One for the Road.
Right.
Um, and around this time, Ray Davies had started dating his what is called the rock and roll power pop nerd look, where he would wear a blazer coat, a bow tie, and a white shirt underneath with his guitar there. I
Right.
guess that came as on stage gimmick for a good reason there, for a good period there, I meant to say. And he
Yeah.
kept that going for a good while there. In fact, the live version of "You Really Got Me" was a multiple. It was played a lot on the rock and roll radio around that year as well.
Right.
Definitely. And of course, we cannot forget the hits they had in the 1980s. They had the song "Come Dancin'," which was a massive, humongous hit during the early MTV years. There, the album "State of Confusion" was a big hit on the radio. The song "Destroyer" was played a lot on rock and roll radio, just as well. In fact, on
Right.
some of the soft rock stations, they still play "Come Dancin'"
Yeah.
occasionally, alongside the new song from Imagine Dragons times.
Yeah.
You know,
The
and
the
it's,
first the first album they did was, like you said, "You Really Got Me" in the U.S.
yeah,
And the big one there was, of course, "You Really Got Me." But they
yep.
also had another song in there that was fairly well known, "Stop Your Sobbing," which
Oh yeah,
actually the
which
Pretenders covered.
yeah, I was gonna say yeah. Apparently, one of the people they influenced was Chrissy Hyde, who was the lead singer and songwriter for the group. There, apparently, I guess her and Ray Davies had a liaison together, and they had a kid. I guess.
I think they
Well,
were actually married for a while.
I believe so. Yeah. I mean, she was like a big Kinks fan, and of course, as we all know, they covered "Stop Your Sobbin'." And of course, Van Halen, they not only did You Really Got Me for their first album, but they also did another song of theirs titled Where Have All the Good Times Gone for their fifth album,
Right.
Diver Down.
Yeah, their second album, they had a couple of songs in there that were big hits. Excuse me, hits. "Set Me Free," uh,
Yep.
"Everybody's Gonna Be Happy," and "Something Better Beginning."
But the one that really was probably one that really took the case throughout the 70s was a song about an encounter with a cross dresser titled Lola.
Yeah, that song was purposely ambiguous, I guess
It
is the word I'm
was.
looking. In other words, didn't really know what it was about, but it was hinted to pretty strong.
Yeah, with the lyrics, I'm not dumb, but I can't understand why she looked like a woman but talked like a man. Oh, my Lola. I remember that song definitely caught a lot of fire, I guess. Became one of their biggest songs there. That classic rock station still often play that song there. In fact, the One for the Road live album that I mentioned, when Ray Davies started the opening chords to that song, the audience just went ballistic. They wouldn't stop cheering for how many minutes there. Like Ray actually had went to the microphone and said, "Hey, it wasn't that
Yeah,
good." So they decided, "Oh, I'll tell you what, we'll perform it, but you got to help sing along," in which they did.
right. Because most people know the words to that song all the way through. Uh,
Absolutely.
Later on, they
And then
released.
no,
Go
go
ahead.
ahead. Let me say this. And in the age of cross-dressing, transgendering, it kind of seems. Wouldn't you say that that song seems somewhat appropriate for this time period?
Yeah,
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess Ray Davies and the boys called it out years before.
right. Hey,
Yep.
the next couple of songs they released, excuse the noise, uh, the aforementioned
All right.
"Where Have All the Good Times Gone" and "Till the End of the Day,"
Yep.
which are a couple other pretty big songs. It Sorry about that. I was
Yeah.
trying to get to something. Then after that,
All
they
right.
had
That's understandable.
"Dandy." They did that one first, and then Herman's Hermit did a
Dandy.
cover of it.
Oh wow.
And then
Oh nice.
"Sunny Afternoon," which was a pretty big song too.
Oh yeah. And we can't
Yeah,
forget. Oh well, as respected man, I guess it's called.
yeah, we'll get to that one. Then another one about this time that was called "Dead End Street," which was a pretty big song actually.
Wow. I'm looking on this right here, and it seems that during the 1970s, there between the 73 and 76 here, Ray Davies started dived headlong into the theatrical style, beginning with the rock opera. What's it called here?
Muswell Hillbilly.
Preservation,
Yeah,
a
Preservation
sprawling.
Act. Well,
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, yeah. A sprawling chronicle of sexual revolution and a more ambitious outgrowth of what's it called here? I gotta move this here. Of the earlier Village Green
Preservation.
Preservation Society. Yes.
Yeah.
In conjunction with the project, the Kinks lineup was expanded to include a horn section and female backup singers, essentially configuring the group as a theatrical troupe. Now, Ray Davies at that time was having a lot of marital problems, which were beginning to affect the band adversely, particularly after his wife, Rasa, took their children and left in 1973. Davies became massively depressed, and during the show in July at White City Stadium, he told the audience he was sick, fucking sick of the whole thing as a retiring. He later collapsed from a drug overdose and was taken to a hospital. Now, with Ray Davies in critical condition, plans were discussed for Dave to continue as a frontman as a worst case scenario. Ray did recover from his illness as well as from his depression, but throughout the remainder of that incarnation, the group's output remained uneven, and their already fading popularity declined even more. You know.
Okay, I got some more 60s stuff when you got that.
All right, go ahead, man.
Tired of Waiting for You.
Yep, as I mentioned here. Yep.
They did a cover of Louie Louie.
Uh huh.
They did a little, it's only a minute and 28 seconds long, uh, instrumental called Revenge that was on their king sized album, which until I read about it, I thought it was just a regular release, but they're calling it a compilation album.
Oh,
Yeah, I got to move. Things are getting better. I got to go now. And a Dave Davies song, I'm a Lover, Not a Fighter.
yes.
And then, of course, All Day and All the Night, which was a biggie.
Yeah. And of course, you cannot forget You Really Got Me, which I know was already included on that one there.
Well, it wasn't on that album, but it was on an
Oh,
earlier one.
really? Oh, wow. So this like another greatest hits like they did with the
Well, it's
Stones.
actually wasn't the greatest hits. It's just a compilation of stuff they left off previous albums.
Oh, okay. So this is like getting into the other stuff there, other than the stuff we know by heart.
Yeah.
I
And,
see.
of course, you had Well Respected Men, which you mentioned earlier.
Yep.
See My Friends. Who'll Be the Next in Line.
Mm-hmm.
And they had another one called Dedicated Follower of Fashion,
Mm-hmm.
which was actually a pretty good song, big song.
Yes. Now I'm looking on here. It said Dave Davies took advantage of, believe it or not. I mean, this is something interesting here. Their debut, of course, after the Van Halen cover of "You Really Got Me," the commercial reemergence gave the Kings got that as a result of that, as well as their cover of "Where Have All the Good Times Gone."
Yeah.
Another early Kings song that had been covered by David Bowie from his 1973 Pin Ups, which is a covers album. The hard rock sound of the album Low Budget, which came out in 1979, helped them even make it even the Kings' second gold album and the highest charted album in the U.S. Remember the song Catch Me Now I'm Falling? That was played heavily on the radio.
Oh,
And the
yeah.
title cut there, and there was a song called A Gallon of Gas, which pretty much which basically told about the gas shortages that was going on in the States around 79, 78 there, when Jimmy Carter was still president at that period. Because there
Yeah.
was this massive gas shortage at that time there. I remember reading about it on the news. All these cars were lined up at this one particular gas station just to get a gallon.
Mm-hmm. Because it was
Yeah.
also limited how much you could buy, because I remember those times too.
Oh, man. That was something, man. That was way something.
Yeah, and
And
actually, we're probably headed back for those times, but I hope not.
I hope not either, man. I just hope things get better. That's
Yeah,
all I ask. We
yeah,
all are.
and we shall see. I mean, I'm
All right.
willing to see.
We all are at this point, folks.
Yeah, and then their next album was Arthur and the Decline and Fall of the British Empire. There's a song in there called Victoria that was played a lot. Shangri-La, which was played a lot. Everybody liked to do songs about Shangri-La for some reason.
Yeah, because people enjoy being around Shangri-La. It's a term for paradise, by the way,
Right.
folks. In fact,
They had a
there
movie
was
out
a
in the
couple.
30s, I think.
Yeah. In fact, there was an '80s band I knew of, consisted of two men of three women called Shangri-La. I was buddies with them for a while. We're still buddies on Facebook today, by the way.
Right. Then, of course, they released the famous Lola versus Power Man in the Underground,
Hmm.
which, besides Lola, included Get Back in Line, which was a good song, Top of the Pops,
Yep.
the Money Go Round, which was, of course, about the record industry. Uh, they did
Their
one called,
version of Welcome to the Machine, I guess.
yeah, Ape Man, Got to Be Free. Those were the notable ones off that album. That was a good album, by the way.
Oh,
I had that one too. I had a lot of these albums by this group.
wow, interesting.
And
Did you ever get Dave Davies' solo album, a couple of his solo records?
no, I didn't, which is kind of weird because as well as much as I like the group, uh,
Because I remember around 1980, at the same time, One for the Road was a big radio hit. Um, Dave Davies put out a solo record. I guess it was called AFL 1-3603. And basically, he took advantage of the new, what he did, he took advantage of the new commercial popularity to fulfill his long line. It was a decade-long ambition to release records of his solo work. The rest was simply Dave Davies in 1980, which was often christened the title that I just gave him because of its cover art and its catalog number. It depicted Davies as a leather jacketed piece of price scanning barcode. He also came out with an album a year later titled Glamour. And I remember the song that came from the previous record titled Nothing to Lose. I remember that was a small minor hit on the radio circuit there around that year.
yeah. And of course, they
And
then did Everybody's in Showbiz, which actually that one was a double set, and the single, well, one of the singles from that was Supersonic Rocket Ship and Celluloid Heroes. And Celluloid Heroes is a really nice song.
wow,
If anybody
nice
wants
there.
to get the chance, they should listen to that song. It is really nice.
It is, yeah.
And then the side two of that album was a live, uh, along with the studio, and they had Top of the Pops on that one. Let's see what else. Holiday,
Yes.
Muswell Hillbilly, and they closed with Lola.
Oh yeah.
So you got yourself a live version of Lola if you want to hear it.
Yeah, but before the one that I mentioned on the One for the Road album there.
And then they followed that up with Preservation Act 1, which had several pretty strong songs on it. Uh,
Yeah. You got to give it though to them for coming up with some very creative album titles just as well there.
yeah, those are almost concept albums. They're very close
Mm,
to being concept albums, and this
interesting there.
this is early. I mean, I say early. Moody Blues had already released Days of Future Past at this time, which was
All right.
obviously a concept album. And then
Oh
they
yeah.
did Preservation Act 2, followed that, and basically it was again a concept.
Any details on the story there? Because other than it was just, I don't. Go ahead.
Well, I'm sure there was, but I don't know if there were. That was a two record set also.
Oh. And around that time, two album sets were becoming a new thing, thanks to Pink Floyd's Ummagumma, and of course, Frank Zappa and the Mother's Invention with their first record, Freak Out.
Yeah. And then they followed that up with the Kinks present a soap opera, which is yet again
Oh,
another
another
concept.
concept album.
And then after that, the Kinks presented Schoolboys in Disgrace.
Mm. That another concept album?
Yeah. And then they followed
Wow,
up
they're
with,
like they're following the path that Roger Waters did in his last years with Pink Floyd. The last records he did with them were all concept albums, whether it's Dark Side of the Moon, Wish You Were Here, Animals, The Wall, The Final Cut.
right. And then they broke back into their regular status of doing things with Sleepwalker, which Sleepwalker was a pretty big hit. And they had another song on that album called Jukebox Music, which was basically a story of how they wanted to keep playing for the guy down the road because he still listened to rock and roll or whatever. And those are both really good songs.
Oh, nice. So they're never mind the thousands of fans. Let's keep it real for the person down the block.
Well, essentially that's what they did, but and then they followed that up with Misfits, which had another song on there that was kind of a history about them. It's called A Rock and Roll Fantasy,
Nice.
which is another really good song that I would recommend. Uh, those three songs, Sleepwalker, Jukebox Music, and Rock and Roll Fantasy, are worth a listen. In fact,
Wow.
they may make it to people's playlists. And then they followed up with Low Budget.
The one I mentioned, yeah, that was in 1979.
Right, Catch Me Now I'm Falling.
A Gallon of Gas as well.
I Wish I Could Fly Like Superman.
Yep.
And of
And I
course,
think the title cut as well.
yeah, Low Budget.
Yep.
That was another. Their later albums are, I think, really good. Give the People What They Want
Yep.
is where they go back and play a lot of the stuff they used to kind of play. Predictable, that was a big hit. Destroyer, which you mentioned a while ago, was a big hit.
Correct. Correct.
And those kind of went back to their roots, which was the thing what they were doing with Give the People What They Want.
Yep.
Then they followed up with State of Confusion.
Oh yeah, remember the video for that for the title cut for that album where everything just keeps fumbling for Ray there.
Yeah, you had that song, and then you mentioned Come Dancing.
Yeah, and also we cannot forget the song "Destroyer," as I mentioned earlier from the previous album. Give the people what they want. That was a humongous hit on the radio there.
Yeah, because it was a throwback to what they did before.
Oh yeah, it was a pretty slamming too, I guess you would say.
Yeah. Then they followed
And
that up with, title escapes me,
oh,
but it had a song in there called Do It Again, which was good. And then another one called Living on a Thin Line, which is a great song if you ever want to listen to
all right,
another
definitely,
good Kinks song is Living on a Thin Line.
yeah.
It's off of Word of Mouth.
I see. I think I remember hearing about that as well. You know, now here's the thing. I got to bring up here. It was after a state of confusion that their success around that time started to fade. It was a trend that also affected the Rolling Stones and the Who, and
Yeah.
during the second half of 1983. Now Ray started work on an ambitious film project entitled "Return to Waterloo," about a London commuter who daydreams that he is a serial murderer. Now, the film gave actor Tim Roth a significantly early role. Davies' commitment to writing, directing, and scoring the New York caused tension with his relationship with his brother Dave. And another problem was the stormy end at the relationship between Ray and Chrissy Hyde,
Hmm.
believe it or not. Apparently, there was the relationship didn't last that too well there, I understand. And the old feud between Dave and drummer Mick Avery also we got reunited there. Apparently, they was beefing with one another before, and then now it just restarted.
Yeah.
And in fact, it got to the point where Dave refused to work with Avroy and called him to be replaced by a dude named Bob Henrit, a former
Yeah.
drummer of the band Argent. Now, of course, after this happened, Ray Davies, who was still on the animal terms with Anne-Marie, invited him to manage Conk Studios. The drummer accepted and continued to serve as producer and occasional contributor to later albums for the Kinks.
Those last three albums,
Yeah,
like you said, were a drop off.
yeah,
Not anything totally memorable in any of the three, uh, but like anything they've done, you will find gems here and there.
yeah.
Uh, but the albums, I think, Visual, UK Jive, and Phobia.
Yes, those were the last two records that they came out. And I remember when UK Jive came out. It was in 1989. I guess what it was hyped up for a while on the old MTV, but when it came out, it just didn't really caught any fire. I guess I
Yeah,
don't remember. I don't even remember hearing any songs for that album being played on the radio.
not
I
really.
guess so. But then again, that's how radio is. That was then. This is now. Let's concentrate on right now. That's
Yeah,
how it
all we
is.
want to do is the new stuff. We don't care anything about old stuff,
Yeah.
even though the old stuff is what influences the new stuff. But basically, radio stations, by and large, general managers are stupid. But that's
Yeah.
my own opinion. They just want to deal with what's hot now. They don't care about
Yep.
anything from the past.
If it has talent or not. Either
Yeah,
way, as long as it sells, it sells. Who cares about the Kinks? Let's concentrate on Millie Vanilli.
or someone of that nature.
Yep. Now, there was at that time around 1989, I guess. No, it wasn't that 1980. It was 1980. It was 1985. Yes. The Kink Chronicles by rock critic John Melderson who had overseen the King Chronicles compilation album in 1972, and there was also a thing called "The Kings: The Sound and the Fury." The Kings: a Mental Institution for the U.S. by Johnny Rogan.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah,
But again, I'm going to recommend to everybody. You've heard the old stuff, and it's worth listening to. But songs that you may or may not have heard on their more recent stuff,
yeah.
I'm
Dig in
basically I'm going to tell you, find them and listen to them.
and
And
dig deeper.
I'm going to mention again, Do It Again, Living on a Thin Line, Sleepwalker, Jukebox Music, Rock and Roll Fantasy. Those songs are definitely worth a listen.
All
And there's
right.
another one I just can't think of the name of it off the top of my head.
Another
But
album.
no, another song
Oh,
off one of those albums.
I see. Now, according to the biography here in around 1986, they signed it with MCA Records for the States and London Records in the UK. Their first release for that for that label was Think Visual. I now remember that now. I saw the album cover at the old lot of record stores,
Yeah,
independent record stores around that period there. It came out in 1986. It was a moderate success, peaking at 81 on the album Billboard's charts.
yeah,
I,
which for the Kinks actually is fairly low because all the ones before that were 10, 11, 12, 15,
yeah.
and then the word of mouth was 57, so you could see the drop off starting.
Yeah. Now, the song "Working at the Factory" from that release, concerned the blue-collar life on the assembly line, while the title cut was an attack on the very MTV video culture, which the band had profited earlier in that decade.
Right.
They followed that album with another live album titled "The Road," which was a mediocre commercial and critical performer. In '89, they released it, you mentioned UK Jive, which was a commercial failure, making only a monumentary entry into the album charts at, get this, 122. And as a result of that, they got dropped by MCA Records, leaving the Kinks without a record label deal for the first time in a quarter of a century. Wow.
Yeah, that actually was kind of a surprise, but
Yeah. Like we said, record companies and the radio are all the same. If you're not selling at this moment, bye bye.
yeah, no matter how big you were before, it doesn't really matter. It probably would have eventually happened to even the Beatles if they had stayed together and
That's
dropped.
true.
But
I know.
I don't think they would have dropped because they were still wildly popular.
Yeah,
Actually,
yeah, but then again, you got to remember, like now and then with the bands of the '60s, if they're still performing or not, the radio programmers and the public that buy into the radio programming always go for the songs that they know, the radio hits, the old stuff there. Whether it's like for example, Judas Priest when they had that album excuse me, Firepower that came out a couple years back. Not once did we hear any the songs on the radio. It was an album. It was a successful album, yeah, but we never heard anything on the radio. Why? Because the people who follow radio only want the radio hits, whether it's "Got Another Thing Coming" or "Breaking the Law." That's how the radio audience is. Whereas the record buying audience will definitely buy the record because they know the band, because they're diehards.
right. I mean, that's the way I used to buy records. When I'd buy them, is I'd buy it for the band, not for.
Same thing with me. With that's and usually in that case, when you buy the record firsthand, instead of when you don't hear it on the radio, it turns out to be so damn good that it doesn't need radio airplay in the back of your head. It
Right.
happened to me with a couple records. So one of them, "Born Again" by Black Sabbath. That to me was one of the quintessential heavy metal albums of the '80s. There.
A lot of people will call it their favorite Black Sabbath album.
Yeah, next to another one called Seven Star, which came out a couple years later. It was an interesting story about that one, as I mentioned a couple of times. That's with that, along with Born Again, has reached cult status.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Oh, and one song they had on one of their greatest hits albums that was, I guess, what you'd call their nod to Christmas was a
Oh,
song by the name of Father Christmas.
I remember that. I've been hearing about that. I remember hearing that during around, I guess, 81, 82 there. They
Yeah,
would
it was
play
around.
that a lot
It
of
was around
times.
that time. But yeah, that was. It was kind of about the poor kids beating up Santa because they wanted Christmas toys or something like that.
And they didn't get it.
Right.
I take it. Yeah, that's. I can imagine what kind of rapper would come up with a concept like that for the States here.
Yeah.
Christmas in the Hood.
Yeah, and one other song I did mention once before, but I'll mention again is "Celluloid Heroes" is a good song,
Ah,
both the live version and the studio version, and they're enough remarkably different, but the same song that they're both worth a listen. A
yeah,
couple extra verses in the live version, at least one, and basically the song's about the movie stars he grew up with,
that's right.
and it's
Now,
it's a good song. I hope you're writing this stuff down because you need to listen to some of these.
yeah, we're talking about to all the people out there just as well, definitely. Now, they're signed. Let's talk about the album Phobia from '93.
Okay.
They signed it with Columbia Sony Records in 1993. As you know, they released it Phobia. They decided to go back to a four-piece band after being a five-piece for throughout the '70s and '80s there. Um, Phobia only managed 1 week on the U.S. Billboard chart at number 166, as had by their performance. Let me see here. No, and then which became very usual for the band at that time. There was no impression of the album in the UK. One single titled "Only a Dream" narrowly failed to reach the British chart. Another two, called "Scattered," the album's final candidate, which was released for a single, was announced, followed by TV and radio promotion, but the album was just unavailable in selected stores. Several months later, a small number appeared on the collector market. The
Right.
group was later dropped a year later by Columbia, and that same year, 94, the band released the first version of the album To the Bone on their own Conk record label in the UK. This was a live acoustic album which was partly recorded on the highly successful UK tours of 93 and 94, and the party they had at their studio there before a small invited audience.
Right.
2 years later, the band released a new improved double live set for the US, which retained the same name and contained new studio tracks, Animal and To the Bone. Now, the CD set also featured new treatments of many old, some of their old stuff there, and the record grew respectable press but failed to chart in both neither the US or the UK. Now, get this. Now, this I'm not surprised about this at all. The band's profile did rise again considerably throughout the mid 1990s as a part of the Britpop boom. Bands like Primal Scream, Oasis, the Soup Dragons, those bands, the Stone Roses, some of the more certainly prominent bands in that decade cited the Kinks as a major influence. Despite such accolades, the group's commercial viability contributed. However, because they were an influence to some of these Britpop bands, the Kinks' popularity still declined no matter what.
Yeah.
It became very less active. Now, Dave and Ray Davies pursued their own interests, each one releasing an autobiography. X-Ray was the title of Ray's book there, that came out in 95, and Dave responded with his memoir, Kink, which came out a year later. The Kinks gave their last performance in mid-1996, and the group assembled what would be turn out to be their last time together. It was a party for Dave's 50th birthday. Dave Hillman, their historian for the group, stated that the symbolism of the event was impossible to overlook. The party was held at the site of the brothers' very first music endeavor, the Clissold Arms Pub, across the street from their childhood home in Fortis Green in North London.
Right.
Yeah. Now, as we know, Dave and Ray have had a lot of personal differences and this was between 98 and 2007.
Hmm.
Now,
Yeah,
now,
and
Courtney,
this is a very strong group, in my
yeah,
opinion. And like you said, a lot of groups have been influenced by them, and they
yep,
were kind of a precursor for the heavier songs that were coming because they their songs were heavy.
very heavy tunes up there. I mean, the songs on Low Budget and State of Confusion, Give the People What They Want, are also state just that as well. It was
Yeah,
rock and roll, but was with a more heavier sense there.
it was a harder feel to it.
Now, there was talk of a reunion, including an aborted a studio reunion of the original band members would have emerged in '99, but neither Dave nor Ray showed much interest in playing together again. Now, former members, Mick Avory, John Dalton, and John Gosling, had regrouped in 1994 and started performing on the oldies circuit alongside Dave Clark as the Cast Off Kinks. It's kind of
Uh,
like one of those tribute bands.
yeah, that's more of a tribute band than it was the Kinks.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, of course, it won't be the Kinks without Ray and Davey. That's for
No,
sure.
no,
So that's what they had
any
to go
any
on.
version of the Kinks has to have those two to be the
Yeah,
Kinks.
absolutely. So what we got here is what they call was a knockoff tribute group. Anytime it has a band name with somebody else in the featured line, you know it's a knockoff. You know it's a tribute group. We've seen it many times before with the Turtles, with Flo and Eddie,
The
John Kay and
Grassroots.
Stebble. Yep. And also, it could possibly be a Randy Bachman and the Guess Who there, or Joey Holland's Badfinger,
Yeah, because if you don't have Pete Ham,
or Tom Evans. It ain't really Badfinger. But sadly, those guys are deceased. They off themselves. So any chance of Badfinger, the Badfinger coming back together is, of course, difficult.
not going to happen.
No.
But that pretty much will put the Kinks. Well, like I said, they were one of the important bands. They weren't
Yeah.
they weren't to the level of the Beatles or the Stones, but they were awfully close.
Yeah.
Part of their
Also,
problem was one of their first visits to the States. They got in a little trouble for trashing hotels and such and got banned from the U.S. for a while.
yeah, I
Which,
read about that as well before calling you up there. They got banned from playing a lot of shows there because of this there.
yeah, and that hurt them in the States for the most part because they weren't out there.
Wow.
But they did okay even with that on their backs.
Yeah, but it's kind of funny this is brought up because, the Stones later on would have a reputation for trashing hotel rooms. At one point in his book, Ron Wood said they had to be registered as Fleetwood Mac because a lot of hotel rooms would not book the Rolling Stones. And we cannot forget some of the shenanigans Led Zeppelin did
Oh
when
yeah,
they were in the various hotel room stories there.
yeah. I don't know what it is, but some groups just do that sort of thing.
That's that idea that I'm free, yeah, I play rock and roll, get paid for it, yeah, I'm a free spirit, yeah, let's have some fun, wow, yeah. Who cares if we tear up one's property? We're having fun, yay. Let's do what Keith Moon did. Let's drive a car into a swimming pool, yay. Oh, we hit that one schmo in the way. Who cares? He'll recover, yay.
Yeah, it's kind of I don't know. It's a strange mentality, but you know what it is what it is, I suppose.
Yeah. I also hear someone else on a sad note here concerning Dave Davies, Ray's brother. Now, there was hope of a reunion around 2004, but that was quickly dashed when Dave suffered a stroke while exiting an elevator,
Mm.
temporarily impairing his ability to play guitar and speak. Following Dave's recovery, the Kinks were inducted into the UK Music Hall of Fame in November of 2005, with all four original band members in attendance. The introduction helped sales for the group. In August 2007, a re-entry of the Ultimate Collection, a compilation of their material spanning their whole career, reached 32 on the UK Top 100 album charts and number one on the UK indie album charts there.
Although some of the songs were single versions, which
Yeah.
I don't have a beef about that, other than I think everybody should listen to the album versions of all their songs because they they're little well they're longer obviously,
Yep.
but they've got extra verses and extra material in them, and they're not cut up.
Yeah. Edit it out basically
Right.
because, singles at that time, had to be about limited. Not every single could be about 7 minutes long like the Beatles' Hey Jude were.
Yeah, I could imagine the uproar if they'd cut that song.
Exact. Excuse me. Exactly. And this then for Christ, these are the Beatles. You do not mess with the Beatles, folks.
Yeah. I mean, the song is a concept. It's kind of a thing where with the Kinks too. The song is an entire story. You can't cut part of the story and have it. I mean, I don't understand why record executives have a problem with that, but you really
Wow.
can't cut part of the story and have it mean something.
Well, I
So those
guess that
songs I mentioned a minute ago, try to
yeah,
find the LP version. Don't listen to the single version if they have a single version.
I
Some of
agree
them do.
I agree 120%, man. I think what it is that, some record labels are like, we got to keep things small because song's too long, that song's too long, and
Well,
they
a
did
lot of
that a
that's the
lot of
radio
times.
stations saying we can't have long songs because we got to play a lot of music, which is
That's true. A lot more for other songs as well. The original version of Twilight Zone by Golden Earring was played a lot on basic rock radio, other than the commercial radio stations, which had the edited out there. So the best thing would be a go for the some of the basic rock radio stations.
well, Radar Love was the same way. They had a single version of that
Exactly. I
song.
remember hearing that. Yep, they did. They edited that out. I remember when I was working at Kroger in Richmond around 2007, we would hear the edited version of that almost on a daily basis.
Right.
Yeah.
And the edited version might get some people interested, but your true audiophiles are going to go for the LP versions of songs.
Yeah, especially when you have a third verse or a missing guitar solo at the end there.
Right. I mean, it was constant in the 60s and 70s, happened a lot,
Yep.
and even into the 80s for the most part. And they're getting better about it, but again, there's not much that's really listenable.
Not really. Not
You
to me, at
mean
least,
there's
either.
there's
Or you or
some,
me.
but nothing that will strike you and go, whoa. Like, well,
Well, I didn't know that verse was in that song. I didn't know that awesome guitar or piano solo was included on this version there. Wow, that's something there. And that draws you into buying the album as well.
exactly.
So you get your not only the hands on the original version, the full length one, but other good songs on that album just as well.
Right.
But sadly, I don't know, like I said, I don't know how it is today because I haven't heard anything on the radio since God knows since I moved here in 2014. I
Well,
haven't really
you'll
paid
hear a little bit
attention.
every now and again, but actually, a lot of it is stuff that I find that's worth listening to, and some of it's older stuff that I missed.
Yeah.
I mean, a good example of that is there's a group out there called Porcupine Tree
Oh, yeah.
that,
I heard that name a couple times.
boy, I tell you what, when I latched onto them, I found some stuff that was kind of like, holy cow, this is a throwback, and
Yeah,
it's
because
some
it's
good stuff.
kind of like the new prog rock scene there, along with the Mars, Volata, and Radiohead there.
Yeah, and Transatlantic and
Yep.
some of those people. There is still good prog rock out there, but radio stations for some reason for a long time just didn't play prog rock.
No.
A good case of that is Genesis. Up
Oh gosh,
everything they
yeah.
did
You thought
before
just
everything they did before Phil Collins, you never heard on the radio because the radio wouldn't play it. But
I
Phil
know.
Collins started singing, and after a couple albums, when he started getting a little more into the pop type stuff, all of a sudden you're hearing Genesis on the radio when you weren't hearing them
All the
before.
time. Yeah, exactly. I made a video about this because there's a rumor that possibly next year the top 40 Genesis, Collins, Mike Rutherford, Tony Banks are going to be getting back together to do a reunion tour. I guess Nick Collins, Phil's son, is going to be taking over the drum duties because, as we know, Phil's had this spine condition, for how many years now, where he's
Right.
unable to play drums. He's just when he did that coming out of retirement tour with a couple of years back, he had to resort to sitting on a chair, just holding the microphone and singing. And when he got up, he would have a cane with him, and his back was like hunched over there.
Yeah, And it's interesting because when we get to Genesis and discuss them, I'm going to be more interested in the stuff they did with Peter Gabriel in the first couple albums with Phil
Absolutely.
Collins.
I even if you ever saw the video I did last night about that, I would love. I think I'm encouraging people out there, especially the young kids or the older kids who only know the top 40 Genesis, to reach out and listen to albums like The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway, whether it's Foxtrot or A Trick at the Tail. Listen to those records with Peter Gabriel as their frontman. Check out the footage of them in performance at various shows or on TV shows there. Check out Peter Gabriel before he became, the spokesperson for Stephen Biko, the anti-apartheid activist, or the big daddy behind those Amnesty International tours in the 80s.
Right.
Check out Peter Gabriel when he was involved with the boys around those years in the 1970s, and you will be amazed. You will be amazed. I guarantee.
Yeah, and like I said, we'll spend a long time on them. In fact, I figure an hour easy.
Yeah.
They'll be one of our features. And speaking of features, our next feature will be The Who.
Mm.
I don't know if we can
Nice.
cover them in an hour or not, but we'll try. And if
We'll
we have
most
to, we
likely
might have a
have.
part two.
I'm thinking the same thing because they had a long ass career, and of course they're still together. But as we know, it's not really the same Who that we knew it from back here because of the deaths of both John Entwistle and Keith Moon. There,
And
it's just
both,
basically Roger Daltrey and Pete Townsend right now at the helms, with a bunch of
which,
backup musicians on tour and on their records as well.
which they're fine. There's nothing wrong with them, but it's
Yeah,
hard to replace an Ent Whistle and a Moon.
yeah. I know there was a lot of talk that to possibly, and this did become a debate later on. This was like, because the Who, they were able to carry on with Kenny Jones taking over Keith Moon's place.
Right.
But the problem with Kenny Jones was that he was a little bit too calm as a drummer, whereas Keith Moon was like all over the joint there,
He
all over the
was
tom toms and the skins.
he was frenetic, to say the
Yeah,
least.
yeah.
But
And here's
well,
something else I remember hearing about Roger Daltrey talking about during the interview. There was a possible chance that Keith Moon may have been have high functioning autism,
it could be. Um,
because which explains all the crazy shit that he was doing throughout the Who's career there, whether it's trashing hotel rooms, driving driving cars and limos into a hotel swimming pools, or doing some crazy shit, exposing himself on a British TV show during an interview at one point there, or sending up a little bomb inside his drum kit on the Smothers Brothers TV show
oh
appearance.
yeah, that contributed to
Townsend's hearing loss,
yeah.
believe it or not. Yeah, that was something there. I can fit to say that along with Townsend's guitar smashing and attitude, the songwriting that he had, along with Moon's antics, I guess if it's to say that the Who were probably the first proto-punk band, way before the MC5 and the Stooges there.
Yeah, it's funny how many of these bands are precursors to what came later, and they influenced it. I mean,
Yeah,
they're not like the Kinks are not a metal band, but
no,
they are darn close.
yeah,
And the Who are not a punk band, but they are darn close.
very darn close. Especially when you consider, as I mentioned a couple of times, Pete Townsend smashing Abby Hoffman with his guitar during their Woodstock performance.
Yeah,
And at that time, it was all peace and love, liberalism and all that. And here comes this British rock star smashing one of their activists on the head
yeah, he didn't make him.
and stating the fact that all these people is living in mud, made him sick there.
Yeah,
So they were and here's something else. Even though they were presented with a how many $1,000 check to them to perform at Woodstock at around 3 a.m., they did take the stage, but they were still balking about it.
Yeah. Well, when we get to who, we'll discuss all that because,
Yeah.
well, we'll get to them Monday.
I thought we were doing our
Oh, you're right.
movies on Monday. Yeah,
Tuesday.
Tuesday we will take a look at the Who, definitely for sure.
I'm not sure what movie we're going to go, unless we want to do Battlefield Earth.
Oh yeah, we could probably talk definitely. Let's talk about that. That's for sure. I, we gotta have a good time with that one.
If you guys want a real laugh, we, you need to see that movie.
You
But
need to see it. I remember seeing it at the City Club TV back in Detroit, Michigan. Of course, the City Club was a big nighttime spot for me around that period. I was like, are you seriously? I mentioned this so many times. John Travolta as an alien, with a monster-looking alien, but with Vinnie Barbarino's voice.
yeah, that movie. Well, we'll talk about that movie. It it was a definite trip. And then of
Yeah,
course
bad
Tuesday we'll
trip.
talk about the Who. Wednesday,
Yep.
TV show.
Number TV show? Let's see. On the Family.
Mm, not yet. Let's
Okay.
do. Well, I was thinking another anthology of some sort, either Outer Limits or. Uh, but I want to make sure I hit one that you've at least seen or familiar with.
Yeah, I remember. Yes, I remember seeing a couple episodes of The Outer Limits there.
Well, let's think about that because it was good for its time too.
Absolutely. You know what? I say screw it. Let's do The Outer Limits.
Okay,
You got me intrigued now because there were a couple episodes that I
there were
that I remember
several
seeing
episodes
from
that
there.
were absolutely remarkable.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And then Thursday we'll skip because of the other thing you do. And
Yeah,
then
Real
on
Swag TV, which I hope, by the way, goes a lot better. It's so far this streaming is doing pretty good there. I had a lot of issues last night. Apparently, this little thing kept popping up on my OBS. There's not enough, space in your disk there. So what I had to do is I had to eliminate a lot of stuff that was in my both my download files and my video files there. Dude, it was I had to go through a lot there. I also had to remove a lot of stuff on my laptop on my screen there.
and on another note, I've sent a couple of messages to Joe whether or not he wants us to do something for him. And then I've also, well, I haven't sent any messages, but I know you were going to talk to JB because he at
Yeah,
one
we're
point
supposed
was
to
one.
do. Yeah, so he said last time I spoke to him was last night when Bullfrog, found out he was now replaced by JB for Joe's Honestly podcast for his Patreon. Bullfrog was not happy about that.
Yeah, which
Yeah,
I was
when you had,
surprised to see that Bullfrog was even on that show. But
I'm surprised they even worked together.
yeah,
And when you when you listen to the way Bullfrog acted when he got the news and called in to protest, you was
yeah, I may have to find
oh
that.
gosh, oh it's definitely it's on the Joe Cronin show channel there. Definitely look it up. It's Out of Nowhere. It was his last. It was episode with Out of Nowhere where JB calling in. He was doing his gaming stream at the same time there.
Okay, yeah, I'll look for that then and see if I can give it a listen, see what happened.
All right, absolutely there. Definitely. You'll be tripped out at the way Bullfrog, that idiot, it was acting that night.
Yeah, well, is what it is, I suppose.
Yeah.
But
All right.
and then Friday, I'm figuring that the Who's going to take 2 hours, so I'm figuring we'll
Absolutely.
have
I
the Who
agree.
again because, heck, when you just talk about Tommy and Quadrophenia, that's going to take a lot of.
That's going to take a lot of discussion as well because I consider Tommy, a pretty good success story anyone who is mentally handicapped, someone who is either blind or deaf, is still able to make it big at something. There's kind of like an inspiration when you think about it there.
Yeah, and It's a like you said, it's a nice little story. It's a
Yeah,
follow up to well, we'll talk about it when we get to the Who.
gotcha.
Um, but at any rate, I guess we are done with this particular episode,
Of the
and
Kinks.
we'll go on to Battlefield Earth Monday, the Who on
That's right.
Tuesday and Friday, and
Continuing with the
Outer
Who on
Limits on
Friday.
Wednesday.
All right, and more of the Who on Friday there.
Yeah, because there's no way we can cover that group in an hour.
That's right.
I mean, we had a hard time with the Kinks, and they didn't have near the material.
That's true as well. But we by the way, we should advise everybody to pick up the songs and the albums that we mentioned here, and go check them out. Definitely.
Yeah, you'll be amazed at those 5 or 6 later Kinks songs I mentioned. If you
Yeah.
haven't heard them, they're great songs, good stories. I mean, they're worth a listen.
All right. Definitely. So that'll be it for our for this week. There. This has been episode. Let's see what damn episode 14
Right.
of music memories. We look at the Kings, and this is Arknolia and the Doctor. And for Arknolia, Stroke of Bean, and myself, we will see you back on Monday afternoon, 7 p.m. Eastern Time on the Arknolia Stroke of Bean channel and the Dr. Earl W. Brown channel. And you guys have a good one. All
All
right.
right, and we'll talk to you guys later.
Bye bye.
Bye.
Yep. Pretty good episode there we did, man.
Yeah.
All right.